We remember the 1929 crash as a sudden thunderclap, the day the stock market fell from the sky and the Great Depression began. But history is rarely that simple. The collapse wasn't just a bad day at the office or the punishment of greedy speculators. It was the end of a decade-long experiment in unrestrained optimism, a financial bubble inflated by debt, leverage, and blind faith in endless growth. When it burst, the world discovered that confidence is a fragile currency, and once it evaporates, no politician can conjure it back overnight. Let's strip away the myths. The crash wasn't a single day of chaos. It was a process, years of excess building toward a predictable breaking point. And if you think this is just an old story of ticker tape and top hats, think again. The same ingredients are mixed into our financial system today. Cheap money, speculative manias, and an entire culture that tells you markets always go up. The real lesson of 1929 is not how fast you can lose everything as how easily we convince ourselves the party will never end. The stage was set in the roaring 20s, a decade of prosperity and technological wonder. America emerged from World War I as the richest nation on earth. Automobiles, radios, and refrigerators transformed daily life. But behind the glamour, cracks were already forming. Farmers were drowning in debt, and wealth was concentrated in the hands of a few. Banks, lightly regulated and often reckless, were lending freely to anyone who wanted a slice of the action. The stock market became the great playground of the 20s. Between 1921 and 1929, the Dow Jones soared from 63 points to 381, a six-fold increase. For the first time, millions of middle-class Americans became investors, convinced they were riding a new economic wave, and they borrowed to do it. Margin trading, borrowing money to buy stocks, became the defining feature of the bubble. You could put down just 10% cash and borrow the rest. As long as prices rose, leverage multiplied the gains. But the moment prices dipped, brokers issued margin calls, forcing investors to sell. This created a time bomb. The higher the market climbed, the more fragile it became. Even leaders fed the illusion. The great economist Irving Fisher famously announced in October 1929 that stock prices had reached a permanently high plateau. These weren't fools, but intelligence is no defense against collective euphoria. The warning signs were there. In September 1929, the market peaked, and cracks began to show. Then, on October 24th, Black Thursday, panic selling hit. Banks tried to stem the tide, but it was too late. By the following Tuesday, October 29th, the panic returned with a vengeance. The myth of endless prosperity was dead. But here's the truth. The crash itself didn't cause the Great Depression. It was the spark, not the fire. The real disaster came from the fragility of the financial system and the policy mistakes that followed. Between 1930 and 1933, more than 9,000 banks failed. Millions lost their life savings. With credit frozen, businesses collapsed, and unemployment soared to 25%. This wasn't a natural disaster. It was man-made and preventable. The Depression revealed just how fragile the illusion of prosperity had been. Between 1929 and 1932, the stock market lost nearly 90% of its value. The Dow fell from that peak of 381 points to just 41. Even those who played cautiously weren't spared, because when banks failed, depositors lost everything. There was no federal insurance, no safety net. Governments made things worse. The U.S. passed the Smoot-Hawley tariff, sparking a global trade war. Leaders clung to the gold standard, tightening policy when they should have been stimulating demand. In America, Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal eventually created reforms like the SEC and FDIC to restore trust in a system that had utterly failed. Now, step back for a moment. Why does this still matter? Because the mechanisms that created the 1929 crash are part of human nature. Think of the dot-com bubble. Think of the 2008 financial crisis, when subprime mortgages nearly brought down the global system. The details: change tulips, tech stocks, crypto tokens, but the cycle is the same. Easy credit, speculative frenzy, collapse, and the desperate search for scapegoats. The same phrases reappear every time. This time is different. We've reached a permanently high plateau. They are mantras of denial. The crash of 1929 reminds us that the most dangerous words in financial history are not about panic, they are about complacency. So what does this mean for us right now? Look at today's markets. Asset prices have been inflated by years of ultra-low interest rates. Trillions of dollars of debt hang over governments and households. Technology has created new speculative playgrounds, and millions of ordinary people are convinced the game is safe. But history tells a colder story. When confidence cracks, protection disappears, and those at the bottom are the first to be crushed. The real lesson of 1929 is about resilience. The wealthy of that era, those who diversified and understood the cycle of boom and bust, survived. The vulnerable, those who borrowed too much and chased easy profits, were destroyed. That same dynamic plays out in every crisis. Ask yourself, if the system wobbled tomorrow, how prepared would you be? History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes with a cruel consistency. The 1929 crash is a mirror held up to our present moment. It forces us to ask, are we any wiser, or just more sophisticated in our delusions? The takeaway is simple. Protect yourself with knowledge. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History is Jance's and I'll show you where to look.